Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're exploring something really fascinating: how cultural values actively shape a child's moral evaluation of truths and lies. We often think of honesty as a fairly simple concept, right? But human interaction actually makes it much more nuanced than that.
So, is telling the truth always the right thing to do? It's a universal question. Most of us are taught from a very young age that honesty is the best policy, and we encourage children to always be truthful. But as you'll see in the data we're looking at today, the answer to that question depends heavily on cultural context. What one community views as a necessary truth, another community might actually view as a disruption of social harmony. And we aren't just guessing about this. The findings in this explainer come directly from a joint study conducted by researchers at Zhejiang Normal University, the University of Toronto, the University of California, and the University of British Columbia. It's a collaborative effort to really understand cross-cultural psychology.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, Study Demographics and Methodology.
This study focused on 146 Han Chinese children. They were divided into 3 specific age groups: 7, 9, and 11 years old. All of them lived in an eastern coastal province in China. To get a really comprehensive picture, the researchers made sure the demographic breakdown was balanced. So, roughly half the children lived in an urban city, and the other half lived in a rural area. That balance is crucial, because it allows the study to capture how different residential backgrounds might influence moral development.
To gather the data, the researchers worked with the children in a regulated setting, usually right in their schools. They used a straightforward 3-step process. First, they read the children short stories, or vignettes, about a character performing either a good deed or a bad deed. Second, they asked the child to classify the character's response to a teacher as either a truth or a lie. And third, the children rated the character's statement on a 7-point scale. There was no complex jargon used at all. The scale simply ranged from very bad to very good, making it a super accessible way for kids to share their thoughts. Section 2, the modesty effect revealed. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the contrast set up here. The researchers compared how children viewed a modest lie versus an immodest truth. A modest lie is when a character hides a good deed they did, like cleaning up the classroom but telling the teacher, "I didn't do it." An immodest truth, on the other hand, is when the character openly admits to the good deed. In a lot of Western cultures, claiming the good deed is highly encouraged, but the researchers wanted to see exactly how these Chinese children evaluated those 2 specific actions. And this chart illustrates a clear developmental shift. The 7-year-olds generally viewed modest lies negatively. For them, a lie is simply a falsehood, plain and simple. But by age 9, and especially by age 11, the ratings shift to the positive side of the scale. The older children viewed modest lies much more positively. At the same time, they rated immodest truths, openly admitting to the good deed, less positively than the 7-year-olds did. Their perspective on honesty and modesty clearly evolved as they grew. Section 3, Public versus Private Contexts. Now, the setting played a key role here. The children rated bragging about a good deed much more harshly if it happened in a public setting, like in front of the entire class. However, if the character admitted the good deed in a private setting, say just one-on-one with a teacher, the children evaluated it more positively. This reflects a developing preference for group harmony. Stepping into the spotlight in public can disrupt the group dynamic. Interestingly enough, the children also felt that confessing to a bad deed was viewed more positively when done in private rather than in public. So where do these views come from? Well, we can connect the children's judgments right back to cultural influences at home. The researchers found that parents who expressed high collectivism, which is a value system prioritizing group goals over individual recognition, had children who increased their praise for modesty. Furthermore, rural children and children from non-professional households preferred traditional values, showing a stronger dislike for public bragging compared to children from urban or professional households. It just goes to show how home life directly influences social views. So, the crucial point is, what does this actually mean for families navigating childhood development? Section 4, Takeaways for Parents. We can reassure parents with this thought: morality is a complex social skill learned by observing the rules of a community. When older children evaluate modest lies positively, they are not simply acting deceptively or somehow losing their moral compass. They're actually actively developing an awareness of cultural expectations. They're learning how to maintain social harmony, show humility, and integrate into their community's value system. They're basically learning to navigate their social world. And it leaves us with an interesting question. As adults, how often do our own moral judgments rely more on keeping the peace than on telling the absolute truth? Thank you for listening to the Integrity Lab podcast. This podcast initiative is coming to you from researchers at the Child Studies Labs from the University of Toronto and University of British Columbia. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.